Well, I guess I'm live. That's good. We'll see what's going on. I think I need a noise gate. I think I need a noise gate. All right, we'll see about that. That's default settings on the noise gate. Test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's try that. Test, test, test. I've always had kind of some little noise issues going on with this computer. Test 1, 2. All right, that's a little better. That's, I guess, as good as it's going to get for right now. Check 1, 2, 3, 4. kind of weird. But yeah, what can you do? Gonna hang out here for a little bit, see if anybody comes in. I mean, we'll see. We'll see. I don't have my hopes up, but always has to be the first one, I guess, that comes in at the same time that you're live, and then I guess starts the interaction. It's something crazy. All right, we are live. That is for sure. All right, live with Radio for All, y'all. Weird though. Nobody watching. You're in silence. What do you do when there's nobody waiting? You know, when you're waiting for others to be watching, what do you do? Do you hear and stay silent? Do some extra audio tests? I mean, all these different live things. People seem to be watching, right? Really, only hundreds at a time. People don't really watch the live stuff, right? They just, and if they do, I guess they end up parking somewhere. Yeah, that's cool though. We'll chill. Oh yeah, we got a little smooth jazz in there now. Oh yeah, we got a little smooth jazz in there now. Oh yeah, we got a little smooth jazz in there now. Oh yeah, we got a little smooth jazz in there now. Testing, testing, testing. Testing, testing, testing. This session is definitely appropriately named Waiting for No One. This session is definitely appropriately named Waiting for No One. There we go. Let's try that. Test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, we're going to engage the noise gate. Now we're at about minus 20 dB. And we're going to set a limiter at minus 3 dB. And a little bit of a equalizer. Test 1, 2. Check, check. 1, 2, 1, 2. Compression. I'm going to try a 4-to-1 ratio. Test, 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 test. Nine dB. Hello, check, check, check. Test 1, 2, test. So from a regular distance, it's about minus 15 dB. Check. Check 1, 2. Oh, there we go. There we go. Check 1. There we go. There we go. What did you think was going to happen? Some gain was added. Hello, hello, hello. Hello. Wow, 6 dB. Check. Testing, testing, testing. 1, 2. 1, 2. Check, check, check. Check 1, 2. Check, check, check. Oh, have to yell. Got to do it. Oh, have to yell. Got to do it. All right, that's pretty funny. But now it sounds a little better. Get rid of some of the boominess. Check 1, 2. Check, testing, testing. Test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. kind of heavy proximity effect. We're gonna keep testing this out. Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's duck the mids a little bit more. Check, check. Testing, testing, testing. Oh wow, that's horrible. Oh wow, that's horrible. You don't want to do anything with the mids, really. Check 1, 2, 1, 2. Hello, check, check. Test, test, test. 1, 2, test. Check, test. 1, 2. Hello, test. Check 1, 2, 1, 2. Check 1, 2, 1, 2. Check 1, 2, 1, 2. Oh yeah, we are live, people. Doing a little test pattern here, just kind of messing around, having a little fun. Oh yeah, we are live, people. Doing a little test pattern here, just kind of messing around, having a little fun. Oh yeah, we are live, people. Doing a little test pattern here, just 0 viewers. 0 viewers. That is amazing. Gonna have a good time with this test. Hopefully this sounds okay. Not quite sure if I even want to use an equalizer on this thing. Probably don't need it. Probably don't need a limiter either. Test. Yeah, I think I'm going to leave it at that. Is this art? I mean, a whole hour and not a single visitor, not even one. They hit the hour mark. Right, we got 6 minutes and it'll be an hour exactly. We're gonna let it go all the way to an hour. Just having a little fun on here, seeing what's going on. Broadcasting live from your mom's basement. Wow, so that can go up pretty high. Not bad, not bad. The thing is, there's tons of people out there watching live YouTube stuff all the time and trying to interact with people. And, a lot of the people on there won't even interact with them. Kind of hilarious, to be honest, but weird. Why? It's like, why would you broadcast yourself live over the entire internet and allow people to interact with you and then not interact with them? I just don't get that. Obviously you can't interact with every single person, but you can have some fun, interact with as many as possible. Well, it's almost been an entire hour and still not one single person has showed up. That's okay, small beginnings, right? Small beginnings. I mean, this is sort of an interesting format. Not really showing your face. Kind of broadcasting, a generic television test pattern and then placing a little Smoky Man GIF in the corner to kind of replicate a webcam feed. It looks legit. I don't know. Not a single viewer. Zero views. Literally zero chats. Zero views. Nothing. Not a zilch zip. Let's see. Oh, there it is. We are 40 seconds into our first hour and not a single view. Excellent. I guess nobody wants to hear me talk to them through their TV. Yeah. Yeah, I do want to kind of get this audio right. I don't know if it's really mixed well or the compressor's set properly, but we'll figure it out. I don't know. What would you even categorize this as? Like just noir or like what? You know? Yeah, pretty dope. Yeah, okay, folks, we are definitely still live. We're trying to do this thing right. Yeah, you never know. I mean, somebody might come in here and actually view this thing. Yeah, all I know is one and all are welcome. If anyone hears this or comes in here, welcome to chat. Just do what you want. Rolling at an hour and 18 minutes, man. Let's have some fun. Cheers. You know, this kind of reminds me of like pirate radio, but better. You know, here we are. We have the abilities these days to, pretty much broadcast worldwide from our bedrooms in high fidelity, in HD video, 4K, 8K, whatever your K, right? And, it's just amazing because back in the day, we would have drooled over this and like being able to just speak your mind. That's what most pirate radio operators wanted to do back in the day. They just wanted to speak their mind and play copywritten music without a license. But sadly, we can't do that here. We can speak our minds to some degree without being canceled, and we definitely can't play licensed music. So kind of a catch-22, I guess. But you can still get away with doing a lot, having a lot of fun with this type of platform. I mean, if you choose to. All I know is anybody that's in here, come on in. You're welcome to chat, have a good time. Pretty much have this thing set up to where I can stand at my desk in a comfortable position. Ooh, excuse me, but yeah, we're live. We're having fun. We're out here on YouTube, live streaming, and just enjoying the night, enjoying the morning. Actually, it's coming up on 5 a.m. here where I'm located, and maybe a good coffee's in order pretty soon. We'll see what happens. See, maybe, after 1 million billion trillion freaking views, maybe then I'll show my face, right? I'll reveal the identity of the masked smoker man. Yep, join the party. Let's chat. Let's have a good time. The art of useless and random banter. This is how we do it, You just got to keep on talking in order to try to keep the audience engaged, even if there is nobody here. You just got to think of things to say. But yeah, I guess you got to get out there. You got to let the world know. You got to say, "Hey, world, I am here. I am broadcasting, and you know, what do you want to do? What do you want to hear? What do you want to talk about?" I mean, all it takes, I guess, is a single spark to set the fire, right? I mean, technically, I guess I'm not exactly sure how long they'll let you broadcast, but I mean, 24 hours, 7 days a week could be possible, I would think. I guess you just stay out here until you become noticed. I don't know. I don't know how it really works. All I know is this could be fun, man. This is exciting. What can I say? I mean, you have a proper setup. You have basically all the stuff you need. It's like, what do you want to do? We are live. Yeah, but now you have this all working in harmony test. There's definitely challenges to this whole thing. If you want to add like collars and stuff like that to the mix, or other people, participants, if you were, you would have to set it up in such a way to where the audio quality would still be good enough for the viewers, because a lot of times that can make or break somebody, right? If you are doing something, you know, I guess for live stuff, people might be a little more accepting and a little more forgiving, but they still demand and desire those types of things, and for good reason. It's 2025, and we have all the technology in the world to try to make this stuff happen. And if your guests, if you will, don't want to participate in a more professional manner by having at least proper equipment when it comes to having like a halfway decent microphone and everything, it's real easy just to cut those types of people out entirely, not let them even really participate. I mean, like spend a little bit of cash, right? Or make your own. There's plenty of ways to make your own microphone these days, and have professional quality. So there's no excuses, right? It literally costs literally nothing. The capsule I'm using, in all reality, probably costs maybe a dollar or two, and that's retail, I would think. But yeah, get yourself a good mic. Have fun, get on the airwaves, as they say. I mean, this is going out to the world, right? Like, there's nobody watching yet, nobody listening, nobody doing a thing yet, but my voice could just as easily be coming through thousands of speakers at this moment. That's a very, very powerful position to be in, especially if you don't mind speaking. Yeah, coming up on 1 hour and 35 minutes, and so far 0 views. But yeah, it's fine. The stream's healthy. Everything's good. Yeah, we are live on YouTube. Live radio for all, y'all. All right, hell yeah, we're still live, rolling past 5:30 a.m. Bro, boo. Oh yeah, people, this is cool. We got some live stuff going on right now. Oh yeah, live on YouTube. Yeah, boy. I think we got it figured out, man. The audio's sorted out pretty well. It's sounding pretty good. It peaks a little bit on vocals. But it seems like everything's working pretty well. I mean, it's barely tickling the 0 mark, and that's it's on loud stuff. So yeah, come on in, people. We are live. We're gonna have some fun. Listen to some Japanese folk music. Maybe just talk about some stuff if anybody joins. That's for sure. This has been going on a little over 2 hours now. We're at 2 hours and 6 minutes, and it's 5:40 a.m. here. Having a good time though. We're gonna have giveaways, maybe. I mean, there's all kinds of free stuff in this world to give away now. It looks like everybody's doing it. Here, I'll give you a pack of chewing gum for free. That's the first person that views the stream that's not me. So. Yeah, make sure you join, like, share, subscribe. Yeah, alright folks. We are live on YouTube. It's been a couple hours plus, and we're gonna kind of just be hanging back, you know. If anybody joins, feel free to chat, have a good time. Yep, through the magic of audio and video, I bring you Japanese folk music, and you know, one of these days we might add a little video elements to this whole thing, but you know, for now we're just broadcasting audio. Have a good time. Everyone wants to know, who is Satoshi Nakamoto? Folks, we're live on YouTube. Don't you worry one bit. We're having a good time here, that's for sure. We're here to answer all of your questions, like what is my purpose? What is the answer to life? Am I in the Matrix? What's really going on? You know, believe it or not, folks, I think I have what it takes to keep an audience engaged. The only problem is I don't have an audience. Will you be my audience? Will you be my spectators? Anyway, enjoy peaceful sounds of Japanese folk music. We're just hanging out by a peaceful, peaceful stream. Yeah, welcome to Radio for All, y'all. This is going to be an exciting time for us. We got some really cool stuff on the horizon here. Yeah, we're going to have a good time here on Radio for All. We're going to try to find the best in audio broadcasts, right? Like, not really emphasized so much on video, but just entertaining audio. I know some of y'all are into your podcasts and things like that, and this is going to be more of a variety type show that just allows the listener to indulge in more than just, somebody's opinion, I guess. I don't know. We will have guests. We will have maybe guest hosts. Who knows? I mean, kind of open to everything. And we'll even use some video elements, throw that in there every now and again to kind of mix it up. But there's so many things to actually indulge in when it comes to audio clips and music and things that just tickle the eardrums, so I'm going to try to focus on that mainly. And focus on having a good time. Kind of new to this, so I'll be running the mixing board and doing kind of everything myself at the moment, doing all the production, everything. So mixing, queuing up different content, I guess, to listen to. Because again, this is going to be an audio-centered, audio-focused type show. Where we just bring you the best in audio. Best in maybe old-time radio, the best in, just stuff like that. Radio4All is live on YouTube, going on 2 hours and 40 minutes. Hope everybody's having a good time out there. Peace.
And it's not until the very last moment that those sparks tell me what on earth they mean.
We need new ideas that music has. The origin of biological form, to me, is the most important unsolved mystery in science. Dr. Sheldrake has a brilliant idea about how form is created, and I'm going to talk about how it works in a couple days. So, without further ado, Dr. Sheldrake.
Well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here, partly because I think this water conference is a model of what scientific conferences could be: open-minded, broad-based, and inclusive. Also because Jerry Pollack, who's such an inspiration for all of us, corresponds so closely to my ideal scientist. When I was a child and wanted to be a scientist, I thought that all scientists would be like Jerry Pollack, and open-minded, curious, and unpompous. I soon discovered that actually there aren't very many Jerry Pollacks. In fact, there's only one. So anyway, I'm very pleased to be here. And what I'm talking about this morning is something I've never talked about before, namely water. Because it's a water conference, and I have, over the years, done some research involving water. So this is, what I'm going to be talking about now is something none of you would have heard before, because I haven't done it before. Of course, I'll touch on various themes that are familiar to you, and one of them is vibratory patterns in water. I think one of the problems within the sciences in general is that in the 1950s, when analog computers and digital computers were both viable options, everything went down the digital computing route. And that's given us many benefits. But analog computers modeled processes by creating processes, rather than trying to break them down into yes and no bits and then kind of reconstruct them from granular atomistic elements. And analog computing provides models of nature which are actually much easier to understand and are in many cases much more appropriate than digital computing. And this is often true of phenomena and processes involving waves. We now know that wave phenomena lie at the very heart of matter. Quantum physics is all about waves and wave patterns. And you can, of course, model those to some degree with equations, but the more complex the wave patterns, the more difficult the modeling becomes. But you can also model them with waves themselves. And the reason I'm so interested in modeling with waves is because I think that the underlying processes in morphogenesis, in chemistry, molecules, crystals, and biology, are to do with what I call morphogenetic fields, and these are basically vibratory fields of activity. They're wave-like and rhythmic. So one way into understanding patterns of vibration is through analog model systems. And vibratory patterns were first studied, well, Leonardo da Vinci was one of the first to observe that when you vibrated piles of dust, they formed patterns. And Chladni, who did the classic work on Chladni patterns on vibrating plates, showed that if you vibrate a plate and you have particles on it like pollen or spores or sand, then the patterns are formed as it lines up on the nodes of the vibratory patterns. And here's a whole series of patterns on vibratory plates showing how form arises from frequency. These particular patterns were produced by Alexander Lauterwasser. Now, Michael Faraday was very interested in these patterns, and he was a very curious and open-minded scientist. And he started looking at them in water. And Faraday discovered that if you vibrate water, you get patterns on the surface, ripples. If you have sloping edges to the container, these ripples fade out like waves breaking on a beach, a sandy beach. But if you have vertical walls of the container, they're reflected, and you get standing wave patterns, and these standing wave patterns are called Faraday waves, after Faraday. Well, it's now possible to study these with a precision never before possible, thanks to the development of the simoscope by John Stuart Reid, who's here at this conference. And my son Merlin and I have got a simoscope laboratory at our home in London. There it is. The simoscope's in the middle. It has a coil that vibrates up and down. And there's a small container here, about 2 centimeters in diameter, with a small volume of fluid. So, and there's a camera that takes, there's the camera, and here's a light ring that illuminates it. And in this, you can control the frequency and the amplitude and do repeatable experiments. This is shows you the kind of pattern you get. You see, that was a threefold pattern with standing waves that oscillate backwards and forwards. So it gives you a six-fold pattern altogether. This is another one. This is an eight-fold pattern. And by vibrating at different frequencies, you get a series of patterns, six-fold, eight-fold, 10-fold, 12-fold, 14, 16, 18, 20, and it goes up further. So there are these symmetry patterns, and these are, as it were, resonant frequencies that appear. When you go up through the spectrum, this one shows, this is a composite, which is what you get if you take exposures fairly, unless you have very quick exposures. With very, very quick exposures, you can see this is an alternation between this pattern and this pattern. This is an alternation between this and this. And so what you're seeing normally is the composite. We went up through an entire spectrum from 50 to 200 hertz. And you get ranges, these are replicates, these three lines. And you get periods when there's no pattern, and then you get into an area where you get a particular pattern, and then you get into no pattern again. It's a bit like old-fashioned radios, where you tune the radio set, and you get a station, and then there's a kind of noise in between, and then you get the next station. So you come in and out of these resonant frequencies. And they show an order as you go up from the bottom here, 6, 8, 4, 10, 6, 12, 8. It doesn't seem to have any logical sequence. But when you plot them on a graph, you see a very distinct series of patterns. This is increasing frequency here from 50 to 200 hertz. And this is the foldness of the pattern with three replicates. 6, 8, 10, 12. 14's missing, 16, 18, 20. Then it all starts over again, 6, 8, 10, 12, and then again. So you see we have these harmonic frequencies. The only way of modeling these mathematically seems to be using Bessel functions, which are really those like vibrating drum membranes. So there's an order in all this, which is what you'd expect really with waves and patterns. When we look at the more detailed patterns, we find that these are like basins of attraction. This is frequency. These are the patterns that we get at these frequencies. And this is the amplitude needed, the minimum amplitude needed to create the pattern. And this is like a tractor, a well, and there's a point here where you get the pattern very clearly with the minimum energy. And there's an area around it where these patterns, have to have more energy to make them happen. This is a resonance pattern. And if you look at the vibrations at these bits in between, what you see is something on the cusp of it's what chaos mathematicians call a chaotic pattern, where it's drawn between two attractors. So this is at the cusp between two of those patterns. Well, you've got the idea that in between there's this kind of unstable area. One of the people who's done most research on this in relation to biological forms is Alexander Lauterwasser here in Germany. And what he's shown is that these radially symmetrical patterns that you get vibrating water have distinct analogues in biological forms like flowers. And they also have analogues in radially symmetrical structures. These are pollen grains. Each of these are from different species, and each species has a particular pattern of the pollen grain. These are single cells. And why this is important is that current thinking about biological morphogenesis is heavily molecular, and most biologists think it all happens just by switching on and off genes. But in a single cell, switching on and off genes can't explain the morphogenesis of a single cell, because the genes are the same for the whole cell, and what's switched on and off is the same for the whole cell. So how does a cell, a single cell, create complex form? Well, I think the only answer is through a morphogenetic field. And instead of morphogenetic fields being conceived of as they currently are, primarily in terms of diffusing chemicals, I think they're actually vibratory patterns. And when you see those vibratory patterns and you see these radially symmetrical structures, these are radiolarians, which are also single cells. They live in the sea, single-celled organisms with silicaceous skeletons. Again, I think that the underlying morphogenetic process must depend on wave patterns of some kind, possibly acoustic waves, but more likely electrical wave patterns within the cell membranes. These are famous pictures of radiolarians by Ernst Haeckel. These forms, those are radially symmetrical forms, but vibratory patterns can also give rise to non-radially symmetrical patterns. This is just to remind you that radially symmetrical patterns appear in art. This is the dome of the tomb of Hafiz. And these are rose windows at Chartres and at Notre Dame. And again, there's a limited number of radially symmetrical patterns. I'm not suggesting that they bought a simoscope and developed these as a result of doing research with simoscopes, but if you're interested in radial symmetry, there's a limited number of patterns you can arrive at. Now, Pierre, could you help me with this one again? Because this is where we need a film. The film I'm about to show is again from Alexander Lauterwasser, and it shows an isolated drop of water being vibrated. And what's interesting is that it undergoes a kind of morphogenesis. It's free to move. And this looks exactly like an insect embryo with its segmented pattern. It's a remarkable way that this spontaneously takes up this form. Lauterwasser is also very interested in tortoises. And in the middle you see a tortoise shell, and around that you see tortoise-shaped plates on which there's a powder. These are like Chladni figures. And as you see, you can get something very like a tortoise shell pattern through vibrations. These are like the nodes in the vibratory pattern. So I myself think that biological morphogenesis is very largely vibration-based, electrical or acoustic vibrations, and that morphogenetic fields are fields of vibration. And I think this is true also. We know it's true of atoms. We know that an atom is a vibratory pattern in the quantum fields, vibrations in the quantum field. It's true of molecules. A benzene molecule, for example, has resonant ring of electrons around it. Crystals are vibratory structures, and so are organisms, and so are we. We have many vibrations in our bodies. We have stir rhythms like heartbeat, breathing, brain waves, and in fact brains have vibratory patterns of activity which are probably much better modeled by vibrating models like these than by digital computers trying to model what's happening in the brain. Now, when I was thinking about all this in preparation for this talk, I recalled that there's a whole series of hydrodynamical models, including my own, which work not on vibrations but on fluid flows, which are also a kind of analog computer. And this one is a model of the British economy that was produced in 1949 by someone called Phillips. It's hydrodynamical. You have reservoirs with the money supply. You have flows that represent income. You have diversions going into tax. You have foreign assets here, the exports. You have a pump at the bottom to get the money back up to the top. And it's all based on a series of tubes and flows, and you can change interest rates, taxation rates by turning knobs and valves. And this model actually worked. It's called the Moniac computer, and they were manufactured in the 1950s. There are at least 40 of them in existence. They were bought by various governments, and for 10 years, the entire British economy was modeled by the UK Treasury using this Moniac computer. Here's the actual device. It has readouts where you can actually see graphs. It plots graphs, so you can actually model the economy in a way that's much more intuitively recognizable than opaque pages of code, which no one except computer experts can understand. Here, ministers of finance, etc., could actually see what happens when you change interest rates and so on, with colored fluids running through. There are 2 or 3 working models in existence, one in New Zealand, where it was used for modeling the New Zealand economy, and one in Britain. So when I spent quite a number of years doing research in India as a plant physiologist, I was the principal plant physiologist at the International Crops Research Institute in Hyderabad, India, where I was working on the physiology of 2 legume crops, chickpeas and pigeon peas. Chickpeas are small plants, also known as garbanzos, which are annuals. Pigeon peas are bushy plants, which are basically perennials. They're usually grown as annuals, but they're a perennial bush. And I was interested in how the pods develop. And what I found was if you look at the formation of pods in pigeon peas, this is the first formed pods, and then you go along. These are later and later, as flowering goes on, they keep forming pods. And the number of seeds per pod remains fairly consistent, and the weight per seed remains fairly consistent. But in chickpeas, which are an annual, you see a completely different pattern. The weight per pod, the number of the seeds per pod, and the weight per seed all decrease as you get to the later formed pods. I then discovered this is a basic principle of all annual and perennial crops, or at least all the ones I looked at, that in perennials, the later formed fruits are the same weight as the earlier formed fruits, but in annuals, they get smaller and smaller. And I think the reason is that a perennial has to hold something back for next year, whereas an annual plant gives everything it's got forming seeds until it dies, it exhausts itself. Doesn't mind exhausting itself because it's going to die anyway. And I was then trying to think how to model them. And one of my colleagues who worked on cereal physiology was trying computer models. And the code was incredibly hard to understand. The computer kept breaking down in the Indian climate. He spent most of his time trying to import spare parts. So I decided, remembering this model of the British economy, that I'd produce a hydrodynamical model of pod set in the pigeon pea, which I did. Not a theoretical model, an actual one. Here's me actually making it out of rubber tubing and bicycle inner tubes and burette clips, equipment readily available in India. And here's a picture of the hydrodynamical model. There's a reservoir representing the amount of available sugar or food. There's a tube here representing the branch, and these are the pods. And when you open the valve, because there's a siphon here, there has to be a certain amount of fluid here before a pod will fill. What happens is this pod fills, then this starts filling and it fills, then this one fills, then this one fills, and it reaches a point where there's not enough fluid here to trigger the siphon. So you end up with a number of pods that are completely full, and then the rest are empty. But if you reduce this threshold, lower this down until there's almost no siphon, no threshold, then they go on filling until the later ones are only partly full, until there's hardly anything in the last ones at all, exactly like the chickpea. And when I demonstrated this model to my colleagues in India, I and everybody else got what was going on straight away, and you could change the levels, you could move the height of the siphons, you could open and close the valves. It was a much more informative model, and it helped us understand the physiological basis of pod set. And in fact, in plants, the sugars move around in tubes called the phloem, and it really is a kind of hydrodynamical process. So modeling these processes hydrodynamically turns out to be much easier, much more comprehensible, much more illuminating than hiring lots of people to write pages and pages of code, all of which depends on theoretical assumptions. And when you don't know much about the system, you don't know if you've got the right assumptions. This way you can do it by trial and error. Now, when I was thinking about this talk and this modeling process, I was amazed to find a paper that came out in Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society just 2 weeks ago called A Brief History of Liquid Computers by Andrew Adamatsky, who's at it's called the Unconventional Computing Lab in the University of the West of England. And he discovered a whole series of other hydrodynamical and liquid models, mainly water-based, including one here that involves jets of water going through valves. This is actually used in engineering applications. And there's been an interest in various defense departments about these liquid computers, because if there's ever a war or a serious international conflict, the very first thing that's going to happen is the entire internet, everything digital is going to be wiped out, as cyber warfare will take it out straight away. The only thing that will go on working is liquid computers, and for message carrying, carrier pigeons. The Swiss army, till recently, had the only remaining carrier pigeon corps in Europe. I think the Chinese are the only people left with military pigeons, because they realize that they may actually need them one day. This example, he gives about 7 or 8 different examples of liquid computation, which are very fascinating. Interestingly, there's a big fashion now for quantum computing, and quantum computing involves superposed quantum states, and quantum phenomena are wave phenomena. Basically, what's happening in quantum computing is a reinvention of analog computing. The problem with analog computing is that you have to have specific analog models. It's not like a generalized machine that can do everything. You have to make specific models. But now, if you look in Nature or other leading scientific journals, almost every 2 or 3 weeks, there's now a new analog computer model of chemical bonds, of molecular processes, and so on. So I think, in fact, there is the beginning of a resurgence of analog computing. And even if we don't call it a computer, if we just call it an analog model, I think that these water-based models are able to provide an enormous illumination to many natural phenomena which dense computer code and digital computers can't. So that's really what I wanted to say this morning, a fresh look at the world of computing and an appreciation of what we can learn from the dynamical properties of water, both through hydrodynamical flows and through wave patterns. Thank you.
For hundreds of years, analog computers were the most powerful computers on Earth, predicting eclipses, tides, and guiding anti-aircraft guns. Then, with the advent of solid-state transistors, digital computers took off. Now, virtually every computer we use is digital. But today, a perfect storm of factors is setting the scene for a resurgence of analog technology. This is an analog computer. And by connecting these wires in particular ways, I can program it to solve a whole range of differential equations. For example, this setup allows me to simulate a damped mass oscillating on a spring. So on the oscilloscope, you can actually see the position of the mass over time. And I can vary the damping, or the spring constant, or the mass, and we can see how the amplitude and duration of the oscillations change. Now, what makes this an analog computer is that there are no zeros and ones in here. Instead, there's actually a voltage that oscillates up and down exactly like a mass on a spring. The electrical circuitry is an analog for the physical problem. It just takes place much faster. Now, if I change the electrical connections, I can program this computer to solve other differential equations, like the Lorentz system, which is a basic model of convection in the atmosphere. Now, the Lorentz system is famous because it was one of the first discovered examples of chaos. And here you can see the Lorentz attractor with its beautiful butterfly shape. And on this analog computer, I can change the parameters and see their effects in real time. So these examples illustrate some of the advantages of analog computers. They are incredibly powerful computing devices, and they can complete a lot of computations fast. Plus, they don't take much power to do it. With a digital computer, if you want to add 2 8-bit numbers, you need around 50 transistors. Whereas with an analog computer, you can add 2 currents just by connecting 2 wires. With a digital computer, to multiply 2 numbers, you need on the order of 1,000 transistors, all switching zeros and ones. Whereas with an analog computer, you can pass a current through a resistor, and then the voltage across this resistor will be I times R. So effectively, you have multiplied 2 numbers together. But analog computers also have their drawbacks. For one thing, they are not general-purpose computing devices. I mean, you're not going to run Microsoft Word on this thing. And also, since the inputs and outputs are continuous, I can't input exact values. So if I try to repeat the same calculation, I'm never going to get the exact same answer. Plus, think about manufacturing analog computers. There's always going to be some variation in the exact value of components like resistors or capacitors. So as a general rule of thumb, you can expect about a 1% error. So when you think of analog computers, you can think powerful, fast, and energy efficient, but also single-purpose, non-repeatable, and inexact. And if those sound like deal breakers, it's because they probably are. I think these are the major reasons why analog computers fell out of favor as soon as digital computers became viable. Now, here's why analog computers may be making a comeback. It all starts with artificial intelligence.
A machine has been programmed to see and to move objects.
AI isn't new. The term was coined back in 1956. In 1958, Cornell University psychologist Frank Rosenblatt built the perceptron, designed to mimic how neurons fire in our brains. So here's a basic model of how neurons in our brains work. An individual neuron can either fire or not, so its level of activation can be represented as a 1 or a 0. The input to one neuron is the output from a bunch of other neurons, but the strength of these connections between neurons varies, so each one can be given a different weight. Some connections are excitatory, so they have positive weights, while others are inhibitory, so they have negative weights. And the way to figure out whether a particular neuron fires is to take the activation of each input neuron and multiply by its weight, and then add these all together. If their sum is greater than some number, called the bias, then the neuron fires. But if it's less than that, the neuron doesn't fire. As input, Rosenblatt's perceptron had 400 photocells arranged in a square grid to capture a 20 by 20 pixel image. You can think of each pixel as an input neuron, with its activation being the brightness of the pixel. Although, strictly speaking, the activation should be either 0 or 1, we can let it take any value between 0 and 1. All of these neurons are connected to a single output neuron, each via its own adjustable weight. So to see if the output neuron will fire, you multiply the activation of each neuron by its weight and add them together. This is essentially a vector dot product. If the answer is larger than the bias, the neuron fires, and if not, it doesn't. Now, the goal of the perceptron was to reliably distinguish between two images, like a rectangle and a circle. For example, the output neuron could always fire when presented with a circle, but never when presented with a rectangle. To achieve this, the perceptron had to be trained, that is, shown a series of different circles and rectangles, and have its weights adjusted accordingly. We can visualize the weights as an image, since there's a unique weight for each pixel of the image. Initially, Rosenblatt set all the weights to 0. If the perceptron's output is correct, for example, here it's shown a rectangle and the output neuron doesn't fire, no change is made to the weights. But if it's wrong, then the weights are adjusted. The algorithm for updating the weights is remarkably simple. Here, the output neuron didn't fire when it was supposed to because it was shown a circle. So to modify the weights, you simply add the input activations to the weights. If the output neuron fires when it shouldn't, like here when shown a rectangle, well then you subtract the input activations from the weights. And you keep doing this until the perceptron correctly identifies all the training images. It was shown that this algorithm will always converge so long as it's possible to map the two categories into distinct groups. The perceptron was capable of distinguishing between different shapes, like rectangles and triangles, or between different letters. And according to Rosenblatt, it could even tell the difference between cats and dogs. He said the machine was capable of what amounts to original thought. And the media lapped it up. The New York Times called the perceptron the embryo of an electronic computer that the Navy expects will be able to walk, talk, see, write, reproduce itself, and be conscious of its existence.
After training on lots of examples, it's given new faces it has never seen and is able to successfully distinguish male from female. It has learned.
In reality, the perceptron was pretty limited in what it could do. It could not, in fact, tell apart dogs from cats. This and other critiques were raised in a book by MIT giants Minsky and Papert in 1969. And that led to a bust period for artificial neural networks and AI in general. It's known as the first AI winter. Rosenblatt did not survive this winter. He drowned while sailing in Chesapeake Bay on his 43rd birthday.
The NavLab is a roadworthy truck, modified so that researchers or computers can control the vehicle as occasion demands.
In the 1980s, there was an AI resurgence when researchers at Carnegie Mellon created one of the first self-driving cars. The vehicle was steered by an artificial neural network called Alvin. It was similar to the perceptron, except it had a hidden layer of artificial neurons between the input and output. As input, Alvin received 30 by 32 pixel images of the road ahead. Here I'm showing them as 60 by 64 pixels. But each of these input neurons was connected via an adjustable weight to a hidden layer of 4 neurons. These were each connected to 32 output neurons. So to go from one layer of the network to the next, you perform a matrix multiplication. The input activation times the weights. The output neuron with the greatest activation determines the steering angle. To train the neural net, a human drove the vehicle, providing the correct steering angle for a given input image. All the weights in the neural network were adjusted through the training so that Alvin's output better matched that of the human driver. The method for adjusting the weights is called backpropagation, which I won't go into here, but Welch Labs has a great series on this which I'll link to in the description. Again, you can visualize the weights for the 4 hidden neurons as images. The weights are initially set to be